Good morning, everyone. So, Indranil, our first question is, as a business leader, when do you use business storytelling effectively?
Okay, hi, good morning, everyone. When do you use business storytelling effectively? Essentially, actually, you can use it for almost every kind of communication. Whenever you're trying to, let's say, connect with someone, build a relationship, build rapport, or you're trying to make people remember a message that you've given them, when you're trying to inspire someone, I think one of the biggest issues that a lot of leaders face, and not just leaders, I'm almost certain everyone on this call would face, is that they would give an instruction to someone in their team. So they'll say, this is not the way to do it. Can you do it this way, and this way? And then they'll ask people, did you get it? And the people say yes. And then you may even ask someone, can you repeat that for me? And the person repeats it. And then 7 days later, they seem to be doing the whole thing. I'm sure all of us on this call have faced that problem. In places like that, when you use either a story or a story structure, you can be able to get people to remember it. Because what stories are, is stories are easy to understand, stories are easy to remember, and stories are easy to retell. So essentially, almost in every communication, as a leader, you could use stories.
Great. Um, from Balu, we have a question by the does one need to attend formal storytelling courses training to become a business storyteller?
Uh, no, my answer is not everyone, but most of us. Why is that true? If you think of some of the best leaders we've worked with, or indeed, let's go back when we were in school and college, some of the best teachers that we've had have all been great storytellers. So some people are natural. Yeah, some people have been using it, and I'm sure that's true for anyone in any organization. There are a few leaders that you've always loved listening to, and the chances are they're almost always doing storytelling. However, there is a science to storytelling, and it can be learned, and it can be. So first is, of course, you need to get someone to help you take away the two myths that most people have, which is, one is, my business cannot use stories because stories are, my business is too serious, or not everyone can be a storyteller. But that's not true. So you might need some help for someone to help you lift those two veils that you have, break those two myths. And like any other piece of communication, communication is learned through three ways. We learned it through instruction. So someone teaches us how to speak. Unfortunately, in most Indian institutions, schools and colleges, we don't teach people to speak, but it can be taught to speak well. Two is we learn from imitation. Yeah, so we see other people and we learn from that. And third is, of course, like anything, any other new skill, it's about practice. So I would say those are the three things that one can look at. So the short answer is no, not, you don't always have to learn, but through a formal course, but it does help like any other skill.
Great. From Pallav Agarwal, which Indian organizations have formally used storytelling as a tool during OD intervention, long-term change initiative? And the second part to the question is, how do you measure the impact of storytelling? And how do we measure the loss of information as compared to other ways, say monologue?
Okay. So two great questions. So let's first ask which Indian organizations have used this as OD tool. Okay, I won't be able to tell you all the organizations that could have used it, then there would be much more. I can tell you the ones that I have worked with, and there are lots. So look at the two kinds of OD. One is an intervention of just building leadership skill. And that, if you go to my website, you'll see that we worked with at least 50 companies, out of which we trained in about 32. We have, and these are running across sectors. Now, some of the OD interventions, which is culture interventions, there are a couple of banks that I've worked with, some FMCG companies, one power company, and two companies which run malls or large infrastructure projects. So there are a lot of people that have been using storytelling for OD interventions. And how do you measure the impact of storytelling? One of my favorite exercises, Gautam, when people ask me how do you measure the impact of storytelling, is I in that organization, I get hold of, let's say, 20 leaders, and I line up the 20 leaders, 10 on one side, 10 on the other. Yeah.
Right.
And I give one side, the first person in one of those queues, a paragraph from their strategy. Yeah. So the strategy document, I just pick up a paragraph and give it to them. And to the other team, I give them a story with almost the same number of words. Yeah. And then I tell them, okay, the first guy, read the story and tell the story, or in the one case, the strategy, and tell it to the next person, right? And we do this exercise where they tell the next person, the next person, the next person. And when we come to the 10th person, we ask each of them to tell everyone what did they hear. And it should be no surprise to anybody that the team that does the relaying of the strategy has almost a completely new message at the end of this, because everyone has done their own interpretation or understanding. Whereas in this, you're fairly clear the same story has passed through. Maybe a little bit of detail has deteriorated, but it has passed through. So I think that, to me, is the best test of storytelling. And so if you go to measure, once you deploy it in the company, this was just let's say an experiment, is that compared to other ways of disseminating information, Pallav, in your company, if you use stories, have you got more people to understand, and more people to sort of relate to or remember the story, maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months from now?
Great food for thought and insights. The next question is from Snigdha Johari. What are the 3 to 5 must-haves to make storytelling effective?
3 to 5 musts to make it effective. Yeah. Practice, 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 and practice. Yeah. So, the basics of learning how to tell stories is not very difficult. What are the elements that we need in a business story? Because remember that in business, my definition of stories is stories are facts. What I help people to do is wrap that fact in context and deliver it with emotion. And so that's easy to do once someone has given you some sort of guidelines. But to be able to do it well and do it in a way that is very effective, practice is the only thing that will get you there.
Great. The next question is from Muskan Garg. How do we make our storytelling attractive?
Attractive. Let me see if the answer. I'm going to
engaging
take the liberty. Yeah, I'm going to take the liberty of saying that I'm going to interpret this question as, how do we make our storytelling effective? Because we are not in the business of entertainment. Yeah. So I am not in the business of someone getting up in a meeting and saying, what a wonderful story. No, we are not in there. What we are in the business of is making sure that the message is crafted and passed effectively. We are not in the business of storytelling for the sake of storytelling. We are using stories to be a better way or more powerful way of sending out a message and making it stick, making it memorable.
Sounds a very generic question, but I guess it says, what is storytelling? And seems to be, that's quite broad a question from Manoj Lal.
What is storytelling? Okay, let me take it to the business context, because that's the conversation we are having today. What is business storytelling, right? Business storytelling, as I said, my definition of stories in business is stories are facts. What we can do in business is wrap that fact in context, because fact alone is very difficult to remember and retain. But can we wrap that fact in context and deliver it with emotion? Yeah. And so another way of looking at because storytelling in business has a couple of parts. One is basic stories itself, right? And then is, how do you use story structures to deliver messages that are otherwise very difficult to retain? Let's say strategy, vision, etc. One of the things you can do is craft that message of the vision, strategy, etc. into a narrative structure, into a story structure. Now, as far as stories are concerned, look at it differently. Think about it as experience sharing. Yeah. Now, I'm certain that all of us in business are at all points in time sharing advice and opinion. And all of you would agree with me that none of us were born with that advice or that opinion. So where did that opinion or advice come from? It must have come from either one of these two things. One is your own experience, and two is experience of someone else that you've either heard, read, or seen. Right? Now, if I translate it into my language, all opinions and advice that we share in business are come from either our own stories, as stories we've been part of, or stories we've heard, read, or seen. And as soon as we share not only that opinion, which is very difficult to remember, but the experience that has given risen to that or made us have that opinion, that's
Right.
storytelling.
Fantastic. Thank you. The next question is quite, I think, applicable to a lot of people. It says, in this attention deficit world, how can I get my audience engaged with my story?
Okay, so in an attention deficit world, how do I get people to be engaged with stories? Very good question. It is an attention deficit world. And not only is it an attention deficit world, it is a world where the amount of information reaching people is humongous, and the complexity of information seems to be going up. Now, it is not about you're saying that how do I get audience engaged with my story? If you're telling a story, audience will get engaged. Okay, let me give an example to all of you here. Raise your hands if you've ever been in, raise your hands using the raise your hand icon. If you've ever been in a meeting where someone has, or where someone is presenting and a lot of people find their mobile phone more interesting. So have you guys been in a meeting where a lot of people find their mobile phone more interesting than the presentation? Wow, a lot of you have. And I must say that a lot of people are lucky. You've never been to such a meeting, great. But for those of you who have been to that meeting, I want you to do this experiment next time. Next time you're in a room where a lot of people are, one person is presenting and a lot of people are looking at their mobile phone, try this. You say, 4 months ago, and you stop. What do you think will happen? Yeah. Put that on the chat box. What, a couple of you, what do you think will happen when we do that? Use the chat box and not the Q&A. Yeah, everyone will look up. Why will everyone look up? Why will we be able to grab their attention? Is that because people are curious? Yeah, that's what someone said. If you think it's just curiosity, try the second experiment, which is in a similar scenario. Yeah, you do where someone is presenting and a lot of people are looking at their mobile phone. You do this. You say, the best strategy in this case, and stop. How many people will look up now? So it's not just curiosity, is it? It is about the thing which says, 3 months ago is a signal to the brain that a story is coming, and the brain loves stories. So the question, Balu, is not how do I get the audience engaged with my story? If you have a relevant story for that situation. So question is, of course, I think how do you get engaged is find the relevant story. But once you have the relevant story, people will automatically get engaged. And I'm going to jump and answer a question that hasn't been asked, Gautam, because that gets asked, and I think it's very relevant in today's scenario where a lot of us are making, telecalls where not just necessarily video calls, but calls where you just have, audio. And there again, in order to get people's attention, if you can start with a story, or you will always get people to listen to you, or use a story, you'll make that message more memorable.
Thank you, I see. The next question is from Madhavi Lokhand. If you are presenting financial data, how does one use storytelling techniques?
Very good question. Madhavi, if you Google today the word data storytelling, you'll get a million hits. And unfortunately, in most of the cases, you will not get get people to actually show you how to do storytelling with data. And what they will show you is what is called data visualization. And so the answer to your question is that in order to do data storytelling, we first have to be able to locate what is the anomaly in the data that we are trying to highlight. Because let's say you have a data where every month your sales have gone up by 20%. You don't need to share that data, right? You can just say, it's gone up by 20%. It is when there is an anomaly to the data, something that went different to the way things were going, is when you want to present the data, correct? And so what data visualization can do is help you perhaps identify the anomaly. And then storytelling is about explaining why that anomaly has happened, right? For example, let me take an example. Yeah. So let's say there was a business that was doing pretty well, and then suddenly in one quarter it dipped and went back to the old level, and you're trying to explain that. Now, how you can use storytelling is tell the story of what created that dip, right? So use storytelling to explain the aberration, to explain the anomaly, and that's how you could use one way that you can use storytelling when you're showing financial data.
In these difficult times, how can we use stories to empower people and help them have a mindset change? This is from Maheshwari Jani.
So yeah, difficult time indeed. Now again, I'll go back to say let's look at any change messaging, right? Not just in difficult time, in any time. Change messaging is one of the most difficult messaging to do, and the way I think you can use storytelling when you're doing change messaging is in looking at two ways. One is, of course, can you share your experience that makes you believe that this change is the right thing to do? So let's say in this difficult time, you are going to tell people, listen, communicate more. Yeah, more is better in over communicate. That's the way we should run teams. And so let's say you're telling all in your organization, all teams, please get on the call more often, please get on Zoom more often. That's going to make it effective. Why should people change? You're just giving some opinions and advice. But I'm sure that you have that viewpoint because you've had an experience where when teams have communicated more in times of crisis, they have been more successful. Tell that story. Yeah. And so using stories as a way to show that whatever you are proposing is the better option because someone else has done it that way and succeeded can be a good way to try and get a mindset change. Instead of just saying, please change the mindset, give an example of someone else who's done it and benefited from it.
Thanks, I see. A lot of entrepreneurs are asking, can storytelling be an effective tool in selling? And could you give some examples in that as well?
Of course. I think, storytelling can be an extremely effective thing in selling. And it's not just in one part, right? So we run this program we call Story Powered Sales, where if you were to take the sales process, Gautam, and break that up into three almost sort of very, very rudimentary parts of the sales process, they would probably be first is build rapport and credibility, right? Till you build rapport and credibility, you are probably not going to be able to connect with people or sell that idea. Because I'm sure, Amy, you'd agree, and Gautam, so would other entrepreneurs, that people have to first buy you and your company before they buy your idea, product, or service, right? And the way they can buy you and your company, through what we call connection stories, tiny stories about you that tell the people of who you are and what you stand for. Right. I can walk up to you and say, hi, Gautam, my name is Indranil. I'm the founder of StoryWorks, and I think I can train. I think I can train engineers well because I'm an engineer and I'm a computer science engineer from Jadavpur University. That bit you're okay with when I say I'm a computer science. What if I came and said, hi, Gautam, you should buy from me because I'm extremely trustworthy? It doesn't work. Why? Because, while we can claim credentials, yes, we can't claim character. And correct, you can get across character by using tiny stories from your own life, which tell people what makes you tick. Yeah? Right. And so that's one way you can build rapport. You can use what we call the company foundation story. How did your company get created? Why are you in business? Yeah, that story can also be able to build relationship and rapport of your company with the client. So the first part is about building relationship and rapport. The second part is about selling change. Yeah, and we already answered part of the question saying, can you give me examples which will help me sell the change? The other thing we do is actually say that you can structure your change message, yeah, into a story structure. What do you mean by a story structure? Stories always have a setup, they have a build up or a climax, and then they have a sort of a conclusion. So can you use your change message of whatever you're selling? So let's say you're selling an accounting software on the cloud, right? Can you start by talking about what is the background? How has the current company that you're selling to, how has their accounting evolved? What are the challenges you think they're having now? Then introduce the solutions that are possible, and then tell them when the solution happens, how will everyone benefit? That has a story structure, right? So you can explain change with what we call a clarity story structure. You can tell people why your product works by using what we call a success story, which is a case study, but narrated like a story with characters, etc.
Right.
Finally, it's about getting the business. Yeah. And we all know that when we're trying to get a business, there will be a lot of, let's say, objection handling we need to do. Now, there are two kinds of objections that people have. One are based on facts, yeah, or their lack of understanding of fact. When you get an objection like that, it's easy to solve that through sharing facts. But there are a lot of times when people have an objection because of a certain belief they have. Yeah?
Right. Yes.
And I call those beliefs anti-stories. Why do I call them anti-stories? Because a belief is nothing but a story in someone's head. And the thing is, you cannot fight story with data or assertion. Yeah. What you can do is replace that anti-story with a more powerful story. And so that's how in the objection handling phase of the selling process, you can use stories again.
Great. Thank you, IC. The next question, I think to somewhat you've answered, but I guess, is there a framework that you can allow, or something that you can share even post the event, a framework to create a story, at least just some kind of guidelines or framework for creating stories?
Yeah. So Sukumar, the thing is that, and I'm going to be pedantic about it, we are not in the business of creating stories. Yeah, I'm just taking the liberty of saying we are not in the business of making up stories. Yeah, and so, but I will answer that question saying, what are the elements that we need to be careful about to make sure that when we are narrating an experience, which is a story, that we don't forget to say. Very rudimentary, here's the following. All stories need to have time. All stories need to have location. All stories need to have a sequence of events. All stories need to have character. And finally, all stories, good stories, need to have a aha moment, something that I didn't expect will happen. And so, so let me give you an example of stories, and I'm going to tie this up with something I said earlier, Gautam, which is if you have an opinion, can you back it up with a story? So yes. Let's say the opinion I have is I really believe that little things can make a big difference.
Yes.
So in 2007, Gautam, in the Second Iraq War, there was an American general in a small town called Tikrit in Iraq. Yeah. And one of his biggest problems was riots in the town, right? And people would get together at some point in time, a group of people, they start sloganeering, and many a time the crowd would grow, and then finally a riot. Now, one day when this American general was standing on his balcony of his office overlooking the plaza, he saw a crowd build up, and an idea came to his head. He called the mayor of the town and said, "Mayor, if I ever call you and ask you to remove the food carts from the plaza, will you be able to do that?" The mayor said, "Food carts? Why on earth?" He said, "No, just go with me." And so the mayor said, "Okay." So the next time this general sees a group of people starting to gather in the plaza, he calls the mayor and said, "Mayor, food carts." And the mayor removes the food carts. And sure enough, the buildup doesn't happen, because those guys who came in the morning at some point are hungry and they disperse, so the crowd doesn't build up. with just that one thing, which is removing the food carts from the plaza, he brought down the riots in the town by close to 60%. And that is why I believe little things can make a big difference. Yeah. Now, with that example, hopefully I've given you guys an understanding of what I mean by share an experience, either yours or someone else's, that drives home the point. And I'm sure all of you would agree that, you've probably heard this from someone or the other before, right? That little things make a big difference. But now that you've heard it along with the story, your chances are you'll remember this far longer. And to answer the question that was there just before this, which is what are the elements? As you would have seen, I had all those elements, right? Time,
Right.
place, the sequence of events, and the aha moment. What is the aha moment? Could you believe that just removing the food carts from a plaza can bring down the riots in the town by 60%? That's the aha moment.
Great. Thanks, Indranil. We seem to have about 14 requests for a question. I guess there are a lot of solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, and individuals who are online. And they're asking, can you suggest any online or courses during this time that we can learn and have more in-depth knowledge towards becoming great storytellers for our businesses?
So great question. And I'm so happy that people are looking at utilizing this sort of downtime to upskill. Now, yes, there are a lot of courses online. There is Coursera that has courses. There's Udemy with courses. Now, the only thing is that I haven't seen a course, Gautam, which really to me comes from just the how do you get messages more powerfully across in a business situation.
Right.
They come a lot from the performance side. Yeah. Now, I don't know if this is going to be relevant for some of the listeners here, because even like everyone else, I do have some downtime. So what we were doing is we had created this course for this period for corporates, where we took the Storytelling for Leaders program, which we run over 105 times with close to 2,000 people in corporates, and converted that into a series of webinars with individual video-based practice through WhatsApp. And just as a sort of a option for entrepreneurs, and not just entrepreneurs, but self-employed people, I've decided to run that program at a discount. So let me just quickly, maybe just let me share my screen and show you something.
This is Anand Singh and Anand Khara. They both asked the same question and had a lot of requests on that.
Yeah. Gautam, can you see my screen which says virtual instructor-led training?
Yes, I can see that.
Okay. So this is how the training is scheduled. So we do a pre-work, and then we have 4 weekly webinars of 2 hours each, where and we are starting this. We announced this about a couple of weeks ago. We are closing registrations on 31st, and we're going to run it for only a group of 20 people. And we do a 2-hour webinar once a week. And between webinars, we do individual. So everyone gets to practice and share the video of their story with me, and I give them feedback. And then once the 4 webinars get over, about 4 weeks later, we do another check-in webinar, right? And this was designed for corporates, but for entrepreneurs and self-employed, we are offering this course at about 75% off, which brings it to about 24,000 rupees plus GST. And so this is one option. So if anyone is interested, you could write into anagha@storyworks.in to register. We will close registrations on 31st. But this is just one way, Gautam. There are other ways. You have the following options. You could start your journey with some of the free courses on Coursera and Udemy. They're not going to be complete, but they are at least good starting points, and they are free. The second is you could read, one option is to read my book, Stories at Work. And the book is actually designed for people who can't attend my workshop, but can do this self-learning. And the third option is something that we have just shared, which is the webinar that we are going to be having.
Okay. Could you give me, this is from Harian Iyer, could you give me an example with a story about how to get tasks accomplished?
Can I give you a story? Can you come again?
Could you give an example with a story
Mhm.
about how to get tasks accomplished?
That's a okay. So now it depends on the task, Gautam. It's difficult to just suddenly get a story unless I get the full context of what task it is to be accomplished. Yeah. So let us say that. Let me just let's take a very mundane thing. Yeah. So let's say I'm the a sales leader. Yeah. And I know that for my team, cold calling is the most detested thing that people need to do, and I need my team to do cold calling. That would be a task to be accomplished. Yeah.
Right.
And it's a task that no one wants to do. Now I can, one is I can keep telling them, and I could do a carrot and the stick. But one of the great ways would be that my question is, why do I believe that cold calling is a great thing to do? So why do I believe, so going back to the question you asked, that particular task that I'm asking people to do is a good task to do or important task to do? If that comes out of thin air, then I don't have an answer. But chances are that I have had an experience where when I have done that task, I have benefited, or I've had an experience where when I've not done the task, I have really suffered. And so while giving that sort of instruction, if I can add that experience, tell the story, that might help in getting the task done. So I would have loved to tell a story provided I had, the full context. And the chances are, whoever has asked this question, if that person can think of what is the experience that makes you believe the task is important to do, share that, and that can give you some example.
Great. Then can you give me one real example of storytelling where it has been really effective, and feel free to narrate the story so we can have a real life example?
Oh, hundreds of cases. So, okay, let me take, remember Gautam, we talked about connection stories. Yeah.
Yes.
And in the connection stories, we said that a great way to build relationship and rapport is to use a connection story, right? So let me give that as an example. So
Perfect.
the person I'm going to talk about is a lady who works in one of one of India's largest IT services company, and one of the biggest roles she has is to sort of make presentations to clients about how the company can help clients in using technology. And the area of technology she works with is life sciences, right? And every week she makes 2 to 3 presentations to really global clients, CEOs and CXOs of medical companies, hospitals, etc., of how technology can help them. And in the past, her introduction, so obviously when she stands up to present, she starts with an introduction. Her introduction went something on these lines. I'm going to make up the name. And she used to say, "Hi, my name is Sangamitra. I was born in Bihar, in the eastern part of the country. And then I did my class 12 in Bihar in sciences. Then I went and joined IIT Delhi, where I did my engineering in chemicals. And then I went to the US and I shifted to biochemistry. I did my master's in the US and worked in this company in the US for 8 years, and that company in the US for another 9 years. Then shifted back into India and joined this company. I've been here for about 9 years. The last 6 years, I've been heading the life sciences business. I'm extremely proud of the work that my team does with many companies like yours. And I'm really happy to take you through this presentation. Yeah. Would you agree that this sounds like a typical introduction? Yeah.
Yep.
So this is what her introduction was. Till we taught her how to use a connection story. Remember, we said the connection story is a little anecdote from my own life, which leaves people with an understanding of what makes me tick, relevant to that situation.
Right.
Sangamitra's new introduction goes like this. She says, "Hi, my name is Sangamitra. I was born in Bihar, in the eastern part of the country, in a little town which had a steel mill. My father worked in that steel mill, and we stayed in the colony. I remember when I was in class 6, one day my father collapsed at work. They took him to the city hospital. He was admitted for 2-3 days. They did lots of tests. At the end, said nothing much to worry about. He's just overworked and stressed. He should relax a bit, maybe not do the night shifts for the next few months. And dad was okay. Yeah. And then things were okay till a year later. A year later, dad collapsed at work again. And this time, he never recovered. It was tough growing up as a only child, and just me and my mother. The company that dad worked in was supportive, allowed us to stay in the colony till I finished my class 12. I'll never forget the day when I was in class 12, when my cousin came to visit us from Calcutta. He had just finished his MBBS degree. And it so happened that when he was there, we took out dad's old files. And what shocked him is in those files was enough evidence of a heart attack coming. Yeah? And ever since that day, I've always wondered, why is diagnostics not democratized? Why is it that because I was sitting in a small town, my dad didn't get the benefit of something that seems to be obvious to MBBS student? So 6 years ago, when I was given the charge of heading the life sciences business here in this company, it has been my dream come true, because what me and my team do for a living every day is to help companies like yours use technology to democratize healthcare, to make healthcare more effective, more to reach out to everyone else. And I'm so happy that I have this opportunity to share with you how we can help you as well.
Fantastic.
Can you imagine the rapport that would have created with the client? Yeah. So that to me is an example of how you can use connection stories.
That's absolutely great. Mushami Gupta and Sanjay Gupta, I trust that story was a real life example of how one can introduce oneself. Thanks, IC.
Yeah, Gautam.
Great. So the next question is, how do we bring credibility to our stories when we are in the mid-level management? So, yeah.
Okay, great question. First is, it has to be a real story. And that's what we've been talking about right from the beginning, isn't it? That stories are facts. Yeah. Once you have a real story, you are going to be credible. There is no question of someone double guessing you with about your story, because it is a real story. And when we do tell real stories, Gautam, people can make out. Yeah. We all know that, when someone is lying, somehow intuition or whatever tells us this is not true. So credibility, when it is a personal story, is automatic. The second way to get credibility is quote the source. Yeah, make sure that is a credible source in the first place. So if you're quoting a book, yeah, or if you're quoting a speech, then say that I heard it there or I heard it here, and then tell the story. So you're borrowing credibility from the source. So source credibility is borrowed from where you borrowed the story. But the other way is ensure that your credibility is not ever questioned, because credibility, unfortunately, Gautam, is like glass. Yeah, one day your credibility is broken, you can't put any more amount to fix it. So as long as you are not lying about your stories and you're picking up stories that are true and sharing stories from your own experience, your credibility, I don't think, will get questioned.
Fantastic. Thank you for that distinction, because I think that's quite a common question that people want to understand. So that's great. The next question is from Shekhar Mani. How would you differentiate between an anecdote, an incident event, and a story? I think that just...
To me, it's very pedantic to try and sort of craft a difference. Anecdote is a small story. An incident is where incident on its own is not a story. An incident, when narrated as an experience or an anecdote, is a story. I think it's just beating around the bushes. They all mean the same thing.
Thank you. This is Suraj Divakaran. Who are the best storytellers in India, brand or person, and why do you think they're doing a good job?
Okay, very good question. The few storytellers that I know who have been natural, and I'm not picking up people who have gone through my program and I know are great at storytelling now because they have practiced and put their mind to it. So the guys who are natural are Gopalakrishnan, ex-Unilever and then next Tata Sons. He's a natural storyteller. Prakash Iyer, again ex-Unilever or Kimberly Clark's lever, and a great storyteller. There's a lady called Lara Beziha, who was who was the earlier CEO of Roche India. She's a natural storyteller. So those are the ones that were, I would say, in the public domain.
Great. I mean, the second part of the question, maybe I didn't catch that, but why do you think that they are doing a good job? These names and these people you mentioned.
Okay.
What makes
So
them
the first, before that, Maheshwari, thank you so much. Appreciate your comment. Why are they doing a good job? So one is, many of them are natural, and what they're doing is, at least let's take Prakash and Gopal, is what they're doing is genuinely trying to say, if I am going to give an opinion, can I give an example of why that opinion is true? And they're doing it consciously. Yeah. And they have been doing it even before the word storytelling became a buzz, but they've been doing it consciously. Same with Lara. Whenever she's preparing for a speech or she's talking to people, she's thinking of what experience of mine can I share, which will help the other person understand what I'm saying. And so it is about being conscious of trying to use the experience. The others who I'm not naming here, who are people who I've worked with over the last 7-8 years, and many of them today are fantastic at storytelling. What they're doing well is practice, 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 and practice. None of these comes on its own. You've got to practice yourself into a new behavior.
Thank you, IC. Thank you, Suraj, for that question. The next question is from Sudha Narayan. When should we not use storytelling in a business setting?
Very good question. So there are only, I think, what would I say? Probably 2 situations in business, only 2, that I wouldn't use storytelling in. The first is when I've been asked a close-ended or a data-based question. Close-ended as in it's a yes/no answer, or a data-based question. So if the boss says, so what was the sales till last year? Boss, 3 years ago is not a good answer. Yeah. Your answer needs to be the sales till yesterday is this. And if he's asking for an explanation why, then you use storytelling. So whenever someone is asking you a close-ended yes, no, or a database question, I would use stories. The only other time that I would not use stories is when the person I'm with is agitated, he's angry, he's upset. Because at that point in time, he's not listening. Forget the fact that I might have practiced and I've got a tiny story to share. At that point, he or she is not listening. Now, what do you do in that case? I don't know. Do whatever you do today when someone is upset. My favorite has always been, especially if there's a problem, to say, it's my fault. Even if it's not, I mean, just get that person to settle down and listen. Once that person is listening, I can use stories.
Great, thanks, IC. Thank you, Sudha, for that question. This question is from Ankit Bharti. You've talked about the structure of storytelling. Could you share some light on what we could do in terms of the structure, but in impromptu scenarios when we want to share a story?
Okay. So, Ankit, the thing is that if you've not practiced storytelling for a while, it may be difficult to pluck out a story and use it in an impromptu situation, only because of one reason, not because you might not find the right story, but because you've not practiced to tell a tight story, right? And you haven't sort of, even if you haven't practiced this story, if for some time you've been practicing storytelling, practicing tightening up your story, some of it will come naturally. We call it muscle memory, right? But if you haven't done that practice, then the reason you might have a problem in an impromptu situation is you might just be too long in your story. And when you're too long in your story, people are going to ask you to, get to the point, And so when many people say, my boss says, kahani mat batao, that's because probably you're all over the place. He shouldn't think it's a kahani. Yeah. He should just listen to it as a point being made. And that can be done when you've done practice, not just on this story, on any story, so that you know how to tighten stories even in impromptu situations.
Great, thanks for that question. This one is from Parvati Ramesh. Hello, Indranil. How can I relay effectively stories relating to customer needs or gaps or business needs? I mean, we have genuine stories, but we still need to make it compelling for teams and make it easy to understand.
Okay, so Parvati, the thing is that the first thing to do when we practice storytelling, what I do is, if I have come up with a story that I want to use with a certain audience, yeah, I would always try and test out that story with people similar to that audience. So I'll tell the story and say, what do you get out of the story? And see if that person is getting the same sort of message as the one that I intended to tell, right? And so if you can do those tests, one of the other things that happens, by the way, is that when you test it with 2-3 people, you automatically start tightening your own story. So one is test and see that the message you want to get through from that story is coming through. And when that happens, the chances are it will work.
Great, thanks, IC. Does humor dilute impact of a good story in business storytelling? This has come from Suresh Gopinathan.
Great question, Suresh. I love humor, but I never use it. Why? Okay, I think to get away with humor, yeah, unless the incident itself you're showing is humorous, and even then, to get away with humor, you need 3-4 things, right? One is you need comic timing. Yeah, I for one don't have comic timing. And as I'm telling a humorous story, because I know the end, I already start laughing. Yeah? And that's the last thing, as good stand-up comics know very well. You can't be laughing at your own joke. You need to be deadpan serious when you're delivering it. So are you good at delivering humor? Right? That's number one. Number two is the humor central to the message you're going to say? Because otherwise the humor will get remembered and not the message. So humor can always uplift the story, but I would be careful that I know how to deliver humor in a way that is deadpan and not start laughing on my own story. And B is that humor is central to the story that I'm saying.
Thank you, Suresh. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, IC, for this interactive Q&A. Thank you for all those who've attended the session. We will surely connect with you within the next 24 hours with an email. We will share the link of the session today and also announce when we'll reconvene again with IC based on the resounding interest to continue this conversation. Feel free to connect with IC, Indranil, and myself on LinkedIn. It will be a pleasure to connect with you on that platform and stay connected. So thank you once again for participating today. Over to you, IC, for any closing comments.
Yeah, just one closing comment. This is tough times, and there is this website that the government has created, which is selfforsociety.mygov.in. It's a great website for people to volunteer, and you could volunteer in your neighborhood. Get people who are old or unwell, their medicines or grocery. There are many ways you can volunteer. I would urge people on this call to try and take out some time and see how you can help. And everyone, please stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll catch you soon. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, IC. Thank you.